The beam does not care how well the Kings played. The beam does not care about your feelings. The beam only cares about if the Kings scored more points in a game than the other team. And that's what the Kings did in this one. So the beam is lit. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't fun, but the Kings won this game. And this is why you bring in DeMar DeRozan, because he was such an integral part of calming things down, him and Fox calming things down the stretch. When the Hawks tied it 109-109, him and Fox combined for a little 6-0 run that forced Atlanta to call timeout, and then DeMar took us home from there. I said it after the Portland game, but especially after this game, this is another one where I don't know if the Kings win this game last season. I think the Kings probably win this game 2 seasons ago and don't win this game last season, but they win it this season. This is why you bring DeMar DeRozan in. The Kings have played 3 straight bad teams in Portland, Utah, and an Atlanta team that is severely undermanned. And the Kings blew the first 2 teams out. And so, I think it's unreasonable to expect the Kings to just blow out, every bad team, especially on the road. I think it's unreasonable to expect them to have 3 straight blowouts. Of course, it would have been great if they did. But in the NBA regular season, you just need to be able to win games like this. You only have so many mistakes you can make against bad teams in the Western Conference. And so it was very nice that the Kings were able to come away with this win. Of course, we can talk about all the things that the Kings did poorly in this game and how they didn't look totally locked in for most of this game and how they just kind of let the Hawks hang around all game. But the Kings won this game. I don't know if there was a single stretch of more than 2 possessions where the Kings played good defense. If the Kings at any point of this game played good defense for a 2-minute stretch, I feel like it would have been a 20-plus point lead, and the Kings would have been fine. But they just could never do it. They weren't locked in on the defensive end in this game. The Kings' offense started off beautifully. It was 5 for 5, but the way that the Hawks stayed attached was getting inside, offensive rebounding. The Kings just were not able to guard the paint in the first half. And the Hawks, they started big. They started with Capella, Larry Nance, and Jalen Johnson. So that's tough to keep all 3 guys off the offensive glass. But I think the real concern was how easily anyone, especially Trae Young, was just driving in and then dumping off to a big inside, or the way if the Kings blitzed, they could just easily find Capella inside for an easy dunk, or maybe for Capella not so easy of a dunk because he missed one. It just felt like the Kings kind of had at the start of the game, got out to a lead, which is nice, and they were locked in, especially on the offensive end, and then it got messy. They were missing open threes, which, is going to happen, but they were missing layups. DeMar missed 2 free throws in a row, and so that definitely helped the Hawks stay in it. The Kings' poor paint defense helped the Hawks stay in it, but every time the Hawks would make a little bit of a run, the Kings would respond. Early in the second quarter, the Kings were going with Lyles at the 5 again. We didn't see Alex Len in this game. And the offense, I thought, looked better with Lyles at the 5 in this game than it has in the past. I thought they got better looks. It was less just passing around the perimeter. They were actually getting into the paint. Now, how much of that is the Hawks just being an awful defensive team? I don't know. So we're going to need to see if that group can maintain getting the better looks when they're playing a better defensive team. But it looked good in this game. But, I always say with that unit, Lyles making threes is the key, and he just was off. He hasn't found his way yet this season, and that didn't change. 1 for 6 from 3, 1 for 7 from the field. He had some very poor defensive moments in the first half. But the Kings were able to just fend off those Hawks runs, making big shots. Fox was having a very good offensive game. Keon Ellis in the first half just went on a little mini run of his own where he scored 10 points in a very quick spurt, knocking down 2 threes. But then I thought the Kings offense for most of the game was very good when they were just running their normal motion offense. But then for some reason in that second quarter, when Okongwu was in the game guarding Sabonis, they just kept trying to find Sabonis in the post. And it's so frustrating because I had this complaint so many times last season. Going to Sabonis in the post is just not an efficient answer. And usually it was something the Kings would do when the offense wasn't working. But in this game, the offense was flowing. And especially with the addition of DeMar DeRozan, I thought that would just be less necessary. But for some reason, the Kings still decided to go to it. And it completely stagnated any of the Kings' offense. It was like a 2-minute stretch, maybe more, of the Kings stagnating their offense, trying to go to Sabonis in the post. It resulted in turnovers. It resulted in just bad shots, which is what happens every time. And that's when the Hawks went on a big run and they got within 3 because the Kings were doing that while also not playing very well defensively. The whole game, the Kings weren't playing well defensively, but when the Kings were rolling offensively, their good offense was, better than their bad defense. And so that's why they kept getting out to these double-digit leads. And so at the end of the second quarter, it's like, okay, put everyone back in the game, stop going to Sabonis in the post, and let's just actually run our offense. And guess what that offense generated? It generated open looks for Sabonis inside, because that's how Sabonis scores. He doesn't post up. Like, posting him up on back-to-back-to-back possessions just doesn't really work. If within the flow of the offense, Sabonis gets a mismatch and he quickly posts up and you can get it to him right away, then that's fine. But it's when the Kings' entire offense is standing around and the whole play revolves around Sabonis posting up, especially when it's not even a mismatch. Like, I mean, sure, if Sabonis goes one-on-one with Okongwu, that is a mismatch. But with how long it takes to get it in, and then the Hawks are just ready for it, the Kings aren't moving, so the defense can just double him and not give up a good look. I hate that offense so much. And right when the Kings went away from it, they went back to scoring and getting that lead back up to double digits by halftime. The start of the third was just like the start of the first, where the offense was just flowing. The Hawks made some tough shots. Like, they made some tough 3-pointers, and that's what kept them in the game at that point. But the Kings were still up 18. And again, they got up 18, and that's when they could have put the Hawks away, but they just could never really lock in defensively. And then when the bench came in, it wasn't pretty. They're also, when the Kings went up 18, to be fair to the Kings, the officiating went through an awful stretch where it was that missed kickball, missed offensive foul call on Sabonis that should have been a Fox dunk. There was a no call on what should have been a charge. There was another phantom foul on Sabonis. And so it just, Sabonis picking up these fouls, which he should not, which comes in later when he fouls out. But the Hawks got back in the game a little bit because of the officiating. There was that stretch. But by the time I felt like kind of the bad officiating stretch was over, the Kings were still up 13. So yes, they may have lost momentum, but they were still up a considerable amount and still should have been able to lock in to be able to really put this game away. DeMar settled it down with like 3 straight middies after that bad stretch of calls. And Lyles did make a nice defensive play where he broke up a play inside, and then Monk had an open 3 he couldn't hit. Monk still hasn't really found his shot yet this season. I think he only had 1 game where he really shot well. But the Kings just could not extend the lead because they were allowing so many open 3s. Because that was really the adjustment for the Kings in the second half from the first half. The first half, everything for the Hawks was in the paint. In the second half, then they were just allowing a bunch of open 3s. So I guess, sure, they made an adjustment. They took away the open dunks. And I'll always rather someone shooting a 3 than having an open dunk. The percentages just play out better for a defense. It's better to allow an open 3 than an open dunk. But man, this game was just so frustrating. And then I thought it was a bad decision by Mike Brown. Definitely not the end of the world. But at the end of the quarter, when he puts in Colby, like, yes, you don't want Fox to pick up a foul. But man, putting in Colby against Trae Young, I understand he wasn't the main assignment on Trae Young. But Hawks just call for a screen, get Colby switched onto Trae Young, and we all knew where that was going. I mean, I knew it the second Colby checked in. I'm like, this is going to go poorly. He was always going to get toyed with by Trae, and it was just whether Trae was going to get an open three, an open layup, or get fouled. And it was an and one. So, I mean, I felt like, yes, Colby needs to do better, but he got set up there. Like, Trae Young is such a crafty player. Putting a guy in for his first, 2 seconds of the game, where he then has to guard Trae Young in a position where Trae's just going to take it himself. It's a tough situation because Colby isn't the most laterally quick, and that's really tough against Trae Young because Trae is so quick. I mean, even Keon had problems with Trae. Keon had some good defensive moments, but he got beat quite a bit as well because that's just Trae Young. I think Fox probably did the best on him out of anyone because Fox plays defense in a way where he's not always just trying to stay directly in front of him. He's kind of hopping around, he's like trying to get around the back of him to knock the ball around. He's using his strength well. So I think Fox probably matched up the best against Trae Young. And then the fourth quarter started, and I mean, it was embarrassing defense. Embarrassing defense. Like just the mistakes. Monk was really bad defensively in the fourth quarter. Herter was bad defensively in the fourth quarter. Keegan was really bad defensively, I thought, at least in a couple moments. Monk just constantly losing his guy, not knowing when to switch, letting Garrison Matthews get open time after time. And man, I hate that guy. I hate Garrison Matthews so much. I thought coming into this game against Atlanta, it would be Dyson Daniels. That would be the annoying one. But at least with Dyson, it's like he's annoying, but like I don't hate him. But Dyson didn't play in this game, which let Fox go for 31. So that's a good thing because Fox can never score against Dyson Daniels. But instead, it's Garrison Matthews. It's just like, I hate this guy. And the amount of times he's getting open threes, it was so frustrating because, sure, there were some times where Trae Young is up top, they're spacing it way out toward the half court line, and Sabonis is coming out, he's trapping, so that's what's generating open looks, right? I still think the Kings could have done a much better job at getting over to those open looks. And also don't leave Garrison Matthews, just leave someone else. There were times where that was a possibility. But the real frustrating ones were just when they would just leave him wide open for like no reason. Where they're leaving him to go trap Trae Young when there's no point to like go trap Trae Young, or you're trapping him on the wrong side, or you just lose him. Like there were multiple moments of Monk just losing Garrison Matthews. It was just open look after open look. Keaton Wallace also got a lot of open looks as well, and he went 4 for 8. Garrison Matthews went 7 for 13. And really, it was just undisciplined defense. Like two guys going out and flying by. I mean, that put the Kings defense in horrible spots. With a guy like Trae Young operating the offense, he's going to create some open looks. He's going to hit some really tough shots. You can live with some of them, but there were just so many times where it was just little dumb mistakes of guys not closing out in the correct way, or guys leaving the hot shooter instead of leaving David Roddy. You know what I mean? It's just those types of mental mistakes. And then I think that momentum, the crowd's going crazy. Then all of a sudden the Kings are kind of missing easy shots inside. Kevin Huerter's missing an easy one inside. Fox missed an easy one inside, right? So that momentum was affecting the offense, I think. And it was just a matter of the Kings surviving until they could get the starters back in the game. And I think Fox only got like a minute of rest. And then they had to put him back in the game because the Hawks were just on such a massive run. All the other starters were in with Monk. Monk and Lyles were not good in that fourth quarter, except for the block Lyles had at the end when he came in for Sabonis. I thought overall Monk had an okay game, but he was just brutal in the fourth, especially defensively, but offensively as well. But once Fox came back in, he gets 2 shots to go down. DeMar gets 1. Atlanta calls timeout. You're up 6. And then a big Mike Brown challenge. He saved his challenge. The Hawks blew theirs, which could have been, really important. The Hawks didn't have their challenge. And Fox was able to draw that offensive foul on Trae Young. Mike Brown with a great challenge. And then from there, DeRozan just took us home being able to draw fouls, get to his spots, knock down free throws. The Kings were able to play enough defense because when that starting unit is in there, that is when they are at their most connected defensively. It's when the bench comes in. Any iteration of the bench is way worse than the starters defensively, except for maybe just inserting Keon for Kevin Huerter. But that's really the only thing I feel like that keeps the defense at least the same level. There were definitely some moments late in that game where I felt like, with 4 minutes left in the game, it wasn't quite isolation time yet. I felt like they should be going through Sabonis at least a little bit, but once Sabonis fouled out, then it's like, yeah, okay, now it's isolation time, absolutely. And that's when DeMar brought us home. Sabonis picked up such a stupid foul on the perimeter. He didn't deserve some of his fouls, but man, that one on the perimeter where Trae Young's just going nowhere, just such a stupid foul. And then he obviously picks up the charge. It was a really dumb play. And so I was very worried when he went out, but Lyles, he picked up a huge block. He stepped in valiantly. Monk still couldn't knock down both of his free throws in the clutch, Well, maybe it wasn't technically the clutch at that point, but late in the games, he still can't seem to find his free throw late in games, but the Kings were able to just sneak away with a win. And it felt like a game from last season. From the perspective of the Kings just not being locked in defensively. Like, we know they can lock in defensively against better teams. If they play like this defensively against better teams, they are gonna lose by a lot. But that's the thing. They never really do. They always pick it up defensively against the better teams. They're more locked in. So that's why they lost games last season, is because they weren't locked in against bad teams. And that was the same here, difference being you have DeRozan going 9 for 16 from the field, 8 for 10 from the free throw line for 27 points, and leading us down the stretch. Because Fox was great, obviously, with 31 points very efficiently, but he has done that before. And I feel like he did that in a very similar game in Atlanta last season. And this definitely also happened 2 years ago against Atlanta as well, where Fox is going off, but it's just not enough. But now having, two guys that can do that is so good. It was really nice to see Fox be able to get his mid-ranger going, and obviously going 4 for 6 from 3. We found out, with Fox having his fingers taped on his shooting hand, that's probably going to be an issue that lingers all season. So that's not exciting. Maybe the Kings can get to a point where he can rest late in the season and get that, fixed up. I don't know the specifics, obviously. Like, does it just require, time without being constantly hit with a basketball? I feel like that's probably what it is. So it's like, he said if you can get a month off, then it might be able to be better. But a month is a long time, and the Kings can't afford that. So he's obviously just going to be playing through it. So the only real thing is if the Kings can lock up a playoff spot by mid-March or something, But he was so good in this game. He was definitely the best player on the Kings. And he made a bunch of plays defensively and some clutch plays defensively when things weren't going well. He would come up with a steal. He had 6 turnovers, and I feel like he's just going to be turning the ball over a lot this season because of what's going on with his finger on his dominant hand. But I felt like, he was so efficient offensively, hit some big shots, and this felt like the Fox offensive game that we kind of been missing this season, because he's scored, in the previous 4 games, but it just, it hadn't been the most efficient. It also hadn't been super inefficient, but it hadn't felt like what we know Fox can do, and so it was nice to see him have this type of game. DeRozan, obviously, just being able to draw fouls, it's so nice. It's so nice late in a game when he can just, have Jalen Johnson reach in, just draw that foul and go to the free throw line. It takes so much stress off of the Kings offense. But it wasn't just late in this game. He had multiple moments where he came through to stop Atlanta runs. And so that's really the role he's playing for the Kings this season. It's like, the other team's going on a run, get it to DeRozan. Also 8 rebounds, 3 steals, a block. he was super active. Him and Herder to start the game were super active defensively, and that's kind of been something that's going on all season so far. And so that's, supposedly your two liabilities defensively. If that's what they're going to give you, where sure, maybe they're not the best 1v1 defenders, they're definitely not going to be taking the best player on the other team. But if they can come up with those steals and deflections like those two have been this season, then that does a lot to help cancel out what maybe they can't give one-on-one. For Herder, I would say this was probably his worst game of the season. I know he had that first game where he didn't score much, but I think this was his worst game because I don't think his defense was very good. I felt like he was okay through most of the game when he got switched onto Trae Young, but then late in the game he got burned. But it was his help defense that I didn't think was great, and he wasn't closing out to shooters super well. He also, like, late in this game, there was that possession where, I mean, the Kings had multiple opportunities. Kevin Herter missed a three. He also missed a layup. Someone else, I think, missed a shot as well. And they could have put it away there, but they didn't. But Herter, I mean, he still had some good moments. It wasn't all bad, but I just think it was probably his worst game of the season. Keegan had a very weird game. I mean, he couldn't knock down a three. He had some really bad off-ball defensive moments. But what he did really well was rebound the ball. I mean, 10 rebounds. Last season, I watched Chris Murray play a lot. And Chris Murray was just an absolute menace on the glass. Just grabbing every rebound. Like, that's what he did when he was out there. And Keegan, we know it. If Chris Murray can do it, why can't Keegan do it? And so now he's doing it. 10 rebounds, 3 offensive rebounds. He came down with some clutch ones. So he couldn't get that shot to fall. I think a lot of his field goals were out in transition. The Kings' transition offense I was very happy with because we know they can be very sloppy in transition, but the ball was moving in transition, very few dribbles, lots of lobs, taking advantage of when the Hawks had a smaller defender back there. So that was big, and Keegan was definitely a part of finishing a lot of those off. Sabonis, 15 points, 14 rebounds, 6 assists. I don't think the defensive problems were really his fault, although he had a few moments where when he was trying to get out there to either hedge or trap, he like kind of missed and had the guard go by him, but that was only like 1 or 2 times. Other than that, I think the defense kind of failed around him because he had some nice shot blocking moments. Well, he didn't have a block, but rim protection moments. Offensively, he didn't get many opportunities to shoot jumpers, and some of that was just because, I mean, the Kings' offense, they were moving the ball around and they were finding the gaps, remaining patient for most of the game. And when they remained patient, they could break down this Hawks defense. And so Sabonis was constantly inside. But again, I just hated when he would try to post up. There were some moments late in this game where I felt like we were going to see him take a three-pointer in the clutch. But then the passes kept being bad to him. So he couldn't, he wasn't in rhythm to shoot and he had to just go track down the ball. But some very dumb fouls, some phantom fouls, I thought, for him to foul out. Not his best game, but still was solid. The Kings went to 3 guys off the bench other than that Colby Jones 1 possession. So Trey Lyles, he hasn't settled in. He's been pretty bad defensively in most cases. He just looks slower than ever. Like he was never the most laterally quick guy, but especially now. And then his 3-point shot. I mean, he's a streaky 3-point shooter, so I feel like it'll come around. This is kind of what happens. But yeah, we need him to be better. We need him to be better. We need Malik to be better too. Malik just hasn't gotten it going offensively, really. Not to the level that we know he can, because he had some really nice moments feeding Sabonis inside. But in terms of scoring himself, he hasn't been able to knock down from outside. And he also hasn't really been able to find a way to finish inside either. So kind of I feel like a performance like the Sabonis performance, where, he can be a lot better than that. But he wasn't the worst in this game for the Kings, but he can just be a lot better. And defensively, he needs to be a lot better as well. And then we have Keon, who 12 points in 19 minutes, had a lot of time guarding Trae Young, with very mixed results. But, after the last game, I talked about what he wasn't able to do offensively, and he came out and he was shooting the three with confidence. So that's what we want to see from him. And he was knocking it down. 2 for 3 from 3. That's what we want to see. Him being able to make an impact offensively because we know what he can do defensively. I think it's just games like this where you're just like, man, the Kings need another wing that can defend. And I'm going to try to not just keep saying that. So I'm just going to say it right now. The Kings hopefully will trade for wing help at the deadline. Maybe Devin Carter can help, but he's 6'3". We need a bigger defensive wing. I think it would help a lot in games like this. So that's just, that's it. I've said it a million times. Everyone knows it. Everyone watching this team knows it. So from here on out, until we get close to the deadline, I'm done saying that because everyone knows. And I could say it every game. Like I said before, you're not going to blow every bad team out. You just hope you can come away with the wins like this. If you're the better team, you should be able to win late in games like that. And now the Kings move on tomorrow to play in Toronto. Toronto will be without Scotty Barnes for both of the Kings matchups against Toronto. So Kings got some luck there. The guy you want to look out for, sure, you could say Davion Mitchell revenge game. But the guy that you want to look out for is Grady Dick. I love Grady Dick. Loved watching him at Kansas. But with all the guys out, Scotty Barnes, Kelly Olynyk, I don't know if Bruce Brown or Quickly, I don't know what their situations are, but they've been out. So the guys that can go off, RJ Barrett can go off, but Grady Dick has been a big part of this offense, and he can do it in every way. He's a big, long wing, pretty much, that has such a sweet stroke, but he's such a smooth player. His stroke is really nice, but he's also able to pump fake, get into the mid-range. He's able to get to the rim and finish. And so it's probably, I don't know who would guard him. Probably like Kevin Huerter, I guess. Because I would guess you have Fox on Davion, Keegan probably on RJ Barrett. And that leaves Huerter for Grady Dick, maybe DeMar for Ochai Agbaji, if they're going with the lineup that they played against the Lakers is what I'm thinking about. So Huerter, he's got to be prepared for a lot of different ways that Grady Dick can attack. But the Kings should win both games against Toronto because they're not a good team. Of course, they can always keep it close because they have good players. The same can be said for any team. But hopefully we can see the Kings a little more locked in defensively. Anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. As always, shout out to the members of this channel, No Rain and Joe Mama. And I will see you guys tomorrow against Toronto. Peace.